On today's episode of What's Going On with Shipping, the Indian Navy once again comes to the rescue off the coast of Yemen. I'm your host, Sal Mercogliano. Welcome to today's episode. So, I've become a huge fan of the Indian Navy. This is a navy that most people don't give a lot of thought about, yet it's one of the largest in the world. And in particularly in and around the Indian Ocean, it is the major force. And since a lot of Indians make up the crews of the world's merchant ships, it is not surprising that the Indian Navy has had a huge presence off the coast of Yemen following the attacks launched by the Houthi against commercial shipping. Well, we just saw the Indian Navy come to the rescue once again of a ship. We saw their role in the saving of the ship, the Marlin Luanda, but now we see it again with a ship, the MSC Sky II. We're going to look at that ship and a few others that MSC, Mediterranean Shipping Company, had a problem with this week. If you're new to the channel, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. So we're looking at a story put out by Sam Chambers over at Splash 24/7, a tough week for MSC's vintage fleet. I have a problem with him calling the ships in this class vintage because I don't even want to think what Sam would think of my age at this point. But he says in the story, it's been a tough week for the safety department at the world's largest container line. This is Mediterranean Shipping Company, with 3 of its 20th century built fleet ships involved in troubling incidents around the world. One shot at by Houthis, another suffering an engine room blaze, and the other knocked out by engine failure. The first of the 3 vessels in question is the MSC Sao Paulo V, which is off Les Escumins in Quebec. This is on the St. Lawrence Seaway. So back on Sunday, March 2nd, this vessel, a 26-year-old 4,688 TEU vessel, had an engine room fire. The vessel has been anchored off Les Cumins until today, when a report came out that the fire has spread from the engine room into the ship's superstructure. Now, I have tried to find some images of this, but it's been difficult. For some reason, CBC and a few other sites are not covering this. This is the best video or image I had, and I apologize for the quality of it. But you can see the fire raging through the ship right now. Not exactly clear. The Canadians have a good firefighting capability afloat. They have obviously vessels in position to help assist the fire. The problem is going to be is if this fire gets out of the engine room, it's into the superstructure, but more importantly, if it spreads to the cargo, then there's going to be a lot of problems. You're talking about heat radiating forward into the after cargo compartment where containers are stored, and if the containers start to pop off, then that becomes a bit of a problem in trying to contain this fire. The second incident took place off the coast of Spain. The 28-year-old 5,711 TEU MSC Katayani encountered an engine failure on February 29th and had to be towed over 300 nautical miles. Took about 6 days, but this is the ship as it arrived in Vigo, Spain. So again, not a great week this week for Mediterranean Shipping Company, but probably the most serious one that they had was the attack against one of their ships off the coast of Yemen. So this is MSC Sky II. Again, we're seeing these kind of smaller vessels being used by MSC. MSC has become the largest container company in the world by buying up a lot of older vessels. And MSC Sky II fits that category. A smaller vessel, older vessel, not very big. But the vessel was attacked on 4 March by a missile attack from the Houthi in Yemen in the Gulf of Aden. Now, the ship was reported to be sailing from Singapore to Abu Dhabi in the United Arab Emirates, and if that's the case, I'm not sure why it's in the Gulf of Aden. Now, Mediterranean Shipping Company has been targeted repeatedly by the Houthi for 2 reasons. One, Mediterranean Shipping Company has a connection to Zim. They're in a container alliance together, so that's believed to be the reason for it. Zim is owned and operated under an Israeli company. And then the other is that the owner of the company, his wife, Rafaela Aponte, is a dual citizenship, both Swiss and Israeli. So it's believed the missile strike took place off the starboard side of the vessel, and it doesn't appear to have been a direct hit. Instead, what we saw, again, very similar to what we saw with Ruby Mar, was an explosion off one side of the vessel. This time it was off the starboard side, much like it was with Ruby Mar. Interesting enough, there was a Indian destroyer close by, the INS Kolkata. Now, the Kolkata is one of many Indian vessels that have been deployed into this region. Now, the crew on board the Sky II, 23 personnel, has 13 Indians on board. When the Sky II reported the attack, they issued a Mayday, and Kolkata responded. And here you can see the destroyer launching parts of a firefighting, a damage control team. They also sent on board a EOD, an explosive ordnance team, to check the ship for any damage or warheads that may have hit the vessel. So this was a video posted on @Indian Navy on X. This will show you the efforts by the ship's crew and the damage control team, that 12-person team sent over from the INS Kolkata. This is smoke emanating from some of the containers just forward of the house. So these are members of the Indian Navy. You can tell by their PPE, their personal protective equipment, which is Indian Navy. You can tell by the insignias. Now, I should note that while merchant crews are trained in firefighting, they don't get a lot of experience and a lot of hands-on training doing that real-world experience. The Indian Navy, however, do practice this. They have personnel who are trained in damage control, so that when you can bring on board a damage control team from a naval vessel, it massively assists you in your ability to put out fires. Now, they're fighting this fire from the after house. It's the containers just forward of that, and you'll see that in a second. I'm going to cut that audio for just a second because there's a loud humming in there. But what you'll see here, so you're looking at the vessel. This is the starboard side of the vessel. The left side of the video there is the after part. The right side is looking forward. And what you'll see here is that the containers had been penetrated by explosions. Basically, there was an explosion off the side of the vessel, and shrapnel had got into the containers here to basically initiate fire on board. Go ahead and let that run there. So just a quick note about this. The difficulty in fighting this fire is really tough. I actually fight container fires on a fairly regular basis. I'm a volunteer firefighter in North Carolina. I used to sail in the Merchant Marine. But down in North Carolina, we use shipping containers for curing and drying tobacco. And about once a year, guaranteed, we will go to a tobacco barn fire. We call them tobacco barn fires because they used to be tobacco barns out here. Well, when you fight a container fire like that, it is a pain because you have to open the doors, but you have to pull everything out of the container in order to get to the seat of the fire and overhaul it. So in this case, fortunately for the crew, these containers were low on the vessel. They were able to get them, and here are some images. You'll see them going in and overhauling the vessel. It is really hot, really terrible in there. It's not a great environment at all to have to go in and fight fire. Really miserable. This is a great image of the crew. You will see members of the crew. You'll see in the kind of the orange coveralls. Those are members of the ship's crew with the less casual gear on. Meanwhile, those with the orange life jackets on and their helmets, and then some of the EOD crew on board there in their military garb. You'll see them mixed in there. Again, these are mainly the Indian members of the crew, I believe. This is why this photo was taken. But an absolutely excellent job done by both the ship's crew, MSC Sky II, and the Indian Navy crew off the Kolkata. This goes back to an issue I've been talking about for a long time about the need for fire and salvage vessels off the coast of Yemen. We saw that come to full fruition with the Ruby Mar, and now we're seeing it off the coast with the attack on MSC Sky II. Some of you may recall from the videos I've done on Ruby Mar, I talked about helping out with a news story that was coming out. Well, here's the story right here. This is the Wall Street Journal. Drew Hinshaw and Joe Parkinson made a 3 hours of panic on the Red Sea. I'm going to be doing a video specifically on this because they had some great imagery and testimony from the crew on board Ruby Mar. But one of the key things that they talk about in here is the fact that when Ruby Mar was hit and the crew had to abandon ship, there were no salvage vessels available to help dewater the vessel, but more importantly, to tow the vessel out into a safer area. One of the things we believe that happened with Ruby Mar is the ship anchored, but then the ship drifted and the anchor dragged across several cables. Now, the ship could have been maybe kept in shallower water. It could have been towed into shallower water, so it sank on the bottom without going completely underwater, would have kept some of the compartments dry and could have been cleaned out of the fertilizer, but now the vessel has sunk. And so having salvage vessels are really important. Now, for commercial companies, there was an effort to get commercial companies to help with the Ruby Mar. The problem with commercial companies is they're not going to go into a war zone. If they're going to get shot at, there's a big problem with it. Now, this is why you want Navy salvage vessels. Now, the closest Navy salvage vessel to this was over in Singapore. Unfortunately, that vessel was in dry dock. USNS Salver is there. The Navy only has 3 salvage vessels. One, USNS Catawba, which is an old fleet tug, is up in the Persian Gulf, but it's really not set up for salvage work. It's more for towing and for special missions. You have the Salver, which is in Singapore, and then the other one, the Grasp, is in a shipyard over in Portland, Oregon. There's a civilian vessel that the U.S. Navy has under charter right now. It's over in Little Creek, but the U.S. Navy is probably not going to divert these vessels because they need them to support the U.S. Navy should something happen to them. Now, fortunately, the U.S. Navy is building a whole new class of these vessels, but one of the things we've done repeatedly in the U.S. Navy is get rid of ships before the new ones are done. And that's happening right now with the new Navajo class. And so what you need is expert firefighting. And I think one of the places that we should look at for expert firefighting is maybe over to the Chinese Coast Guard. So I put a poll out here asking which video I should do next, whether one on the Chinese Coast Guard or one on the Indian Navy. And it was very close. And one of the comments I got repeatedly is do both. And I'm going to do both. We'll do a follow-up on this. But I kind of half-jokingly talk about this because the Chinese Coast Guard is out in the South China Sea right now attacking vessels of the Philippine Navy, which are on resupply missions. Now, some people will talk about the fact that shooting water cannons at vessels is not dangerous. I want to show you the image from the bridge of one of these resupply vessels. That is the front windows of on the bridge blowing out on board the ship. Shows you the damage done by the Chinese Coast Guard. Also goes to show you the power of water you can get from firefighting cannons mounted on vessels. And in a strange way, it emphasizes the fact of should the fire break out even more severely on MSC Sao Paulo 5, which is up in the St. Lawrence River, or on board MSC Sky II, or on other vessels in and around the Red Sea that are attacked by the Houthi, you really need to get these fleet and salvage vessels in place to help this. It's kind of a weird mishmash of stories here, but it kind of goes to the point. And I also want to go again and emphasize the role the Indian Navy is playing. They are doing a phenomenal role out there, really unheralded. Now, there's a lot of question about how coordinated the Indian Navy is with Operation Prosperity Guardian. This is the U.S. Navy, along with its allies, doing defense. While the Indian Navy is not providing these gatekeeper defense, in other words, they're not manning a missile line or a picket line between the main shipping line and Yemen, they are providing assistance to vessels when they need them. And this is part of that overall effort. You need the U.S. Navy and the Royal Navy providing that gatekeeper, while at the same time, you need the Italian Navy, you need the German Navy when they're not shooting down U.S. Reaper drones. You need the French Navy. You need the Indian Navy. You need other navies to provide this kind of emergency support and escort as needed. It is very important for there to be a combined effort to do this. And again, what we're seeing is greater danger and greater hazard are being subjected to the merchant mariners who have nothing to do with the situation that the Houthi are fighting about. Again, this is global shipping just trying to sail from point to point, and they are being subjected to attack by the Houthi. This is an attack on the freedom of the seas. I hope you enjoyed today's episode and video. If you did, hey, take a moment, subscribe to the channel and hit the bell so you'll be alerted about new videos as they come out. Leave a comment, share it across social media, give it a big thumbs up, and if you can, support the page. How do you do that? Well, you can hit the super thanks button down below or head on over to Patreon and become a monthly, yearly subscriber. It is my patrons who allow me to keep doing this all the time. Until our next video, this is Sal, signing off.